All right, welcome back. We are INFR3335U, Social and Multiplayer Game Design in the fall 2021 semester at Ontario Tech University. And it's week 7, part 1 of our broadcast. Here I am. And we're talking about characterization and character development for mobile games. That's kind of our main topic this week. We'll talk about a few things. But first, like normal, let's take a look at our schedule and see where we are. We're sitting at October 27th, just near the end. And one of the things I want to talk about a little bit is project part 2. Now, these project parts are not meant to be extra work necessarily for you guys beyond the stuff that you're presenting to James. So now there's some people who are doing that crazy project, and I won't mention what it is, with Dr. Hogue. And for those people, you're going to have to put together, like I said to you, continue with your development of the mobile game that you're making for me. And I've updated some of the requirements up there. Let's take a look at some of the requirements now. For project part 2, which is your second playable release due this Sunday at midnight. Now, I just wanted to talk about this a little bit. Again, it's an iteration. So all we're doing is we're adding on to what you've already had. Again, it's still going to be a WebGL build. You're not expected to make a mobile game yet, but what we need is some basic things, and let's talk about those things. I'm just going to go up on Canvas here to talk about it. So if we go to assignments, and if we hit our assignment for project part 2, this is a group assignment. So again, it's supposed to be done a little easier for everybody. So it's not supposed to be something that you're kind of spinning your wheels on. Again, due week 7, October 31st. So it's the witching hour this Sunday at midnight. So that's like Halloween. What we need is basically another iteration of your game. Okay, so what is required? Part 1 is where all the meat and bones is what I'm looking at for this one is, right? So again, for the second playable, you'll acquire or create, and again, hopefully you've got good artists on your team, to create as many graphics and sound assets as required to create at least 50% of your level, that concept that you were building on from last time. That's what I'm hoping. And again, this is for like this first half, this semester, as we're building up more and more things. And when I say 50%, I mean like get at least some of your level built. Your character or camera controller should be working at this point, so you should be able to know how to do that with Unity. I think from that, from the stuff that you've done for your midterm and everything else, you should have more experience now building things with Unity. So enemies should be present and fully functional. And when I mean fully functional, I mean like they should have some kind of AI sensing and or pathfinding. You can turn that on with Unity, pretty simple. But it would be nice, and I say AI sensing and pathfinding would be nice for this release. Fully functional means that they must move in some way, some pattern. It's up to you. And if you're thinking of including things like an inventory system or a mini map or navigation system at this point, again, some ideas for your game engines class as well. These are systems that you need to build for game engines anyway. And the idea here is that the project you're building for me should be kind of similar to the project you're building for Professor Alvaro for game engines. So it shouldn't be like an extra one, another one. If that's what you're doing, that's a lot. That's pretty crazy. So see if you can try and combine some of these systems so that they work both in Unity for Professor Alvaro and for me for mobile game, our mobile game dev thing that we're doing for social and multiplayer game design. Okay, so that's one thing we're wanting you to do. And one thing is you must build your second playable release in Unity with WebGL build target again, because it's your second kind of go at finding the fun. This is kind of the idea behind here. The rest is the exact same as what I've looked for before, which is I need you to update your GDDs. So any new design, any mechanics that you've added from last time, that should be there. Screenshots of your current game should be included. So what does your game look like right now? Update any wireframes for your game, anything else that you've added. If you've added additional screens in terms of instructions or a gameplay screen or a game over screen or something like that, you should include those as well. And also cite any references for any new assets that you've acquired. So where you get them from, or if you made them, that's better, obviously. Version control should be there, just like before. Project management, show me where you're at. So basically, this is another kick at the can of talking about your project. Day says, had no clue the two classes would share the same game. Yeah, I mean, it's okay for you guys to do that. You don't have to make a completely new game. because at the end of the day, it should be linked to your GDW project, right? So if guys and sold to you in terms of something very, very cool with volumetric, kind of the volumetric game that you're making. All right, so project management, again, you're going to kind of update your Trello or Jira. And if you've already done that, all you need to do is show me that you've done that. And these are 5%, easy 5% marks for this with James. Then you're just going to basically package it together and update your game for me. That's all you're doing. Yeah, I'm sorry, Fardeen. I know, sir, are you talking about your first assignment for game engines? Is that what you meant? Game engines. Yeah, typically they have a project for game engines that they ask you to do, right? So Professor Alvar will typically ask you to do a project, and then you do that in your tutorials now, if I'm not wrong. But hopefully you have. I'm not sure if you have a larger project for game engines, but you should. And I'm pretty sure that you can. There's some systems that you can develop. You're supposed to develop for your games, and I think you're going to do the same thing. You can use those same systems for me. I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping that you can do. At least last time when I taught game engines, there was that. Maybe Professor Alvaro has removed that requirement, but that makes it easier for you in some ways. All right, so of course, a little bit of a demo video that I'm going to ask you guys to do. So you're going to use some capture tool and a team slide, basically an update of what you've shown me before. Another opportunity to talk about your game that you've been making for GDW or this little game. And I mean little, guys. Keep your little mobile game small. You should really be building stuff right in tutorials. So the stuff that Stephen is showing you, if you are building an extra game because you guys are doing your volumetric game that you're doing for Dr. Hogue. If you're building an extra game for me so that it can become mobile, keep it small, keep it simple, keep it fun. Okay, so something not too crazy. I don't expect it to be like next level or anything like that. As long as it meets requirements in terms of it's a mobile game, it's in 3D, you're adding different pieces to it, components. And what I'm asking for here is I'm hoping that you can add in some movement for your character at this point, and your AI stuff should be starting to work. Okay, for this this release is what I'm hoping. Your last GW game remake for this class, is that small enough? Well, as long as it's 3D, and if you've done it in Unity, yeah, it's totally small enough. If you can reuse stuff that you've already done because you're porting something, especially if you're doing that volumetric game, I really don't want you guys to come up with like something like totally crazy new, and in addition to what you're doing for GDW. That doesn't make sense. It's not fair. And the idea here is you're going to make it mobile, right? So if your game is something that you can see as mobile and that you've made already, I'm perfectly fine with you continuing moving things forward. Yes, yes. There's no mobile component. Mobile starts in the third playable. Exactly what you said, Trade. Okay, if you want to retrofit some of that, Jonathan. Again, don't make it too crazy. Again, if you're going to add some enemies, 1 or 2. And I really mean that. I mean, keep it small because really you're testing what it would be like to play things on mobile, and there's enough for you guys to do with mobile development as it is, compared to making it a really crazy fleshed out game. Good news is if you're working on the volumetric game with Dr. Hogue and you're making one for me, that's a second game you're actually going to have by the end of this semester that you can add into your portfolio. Again, I'm not looking for perfection, guys. I need some gameplay. I need it to look good. You've got your artists and hopefully you've got technical artists and people on your team that can do the things that need to be done. Sound manager for making some cool sounds, and have some fun with it and learn Unity, which is what I'm hoping that you can do out of this whole thing. All right. So again, if you need feedback on anything like that, please book an appointment with me. I am available on Friday if you have time in the afternoon, so we can I have some office hours available if you want to show me what you got and what you're thinking as you move forward with the next part of your game design. Okay, so things that you have to submit for this one is a PDF of your game design document, again version 2, so an update of what you did earlier. A working link to your team's GitHub repo. Hopefully you've maintained that. And a working link to your demo video. I'm hoping it'll be YouTube. It'll make it nice and easy for us to look at. And 1 or more screenshots of your current backlog and or sprint backlog and your task board. So something to show me your the update for your kind of your project. Okay, that's what I'm really looking for. So that is your second playable release. 5% of your final grade as a group, and you're kind of producing that for me for this Sunday. Okay, so that is kind of where we were here. And I just wanted to kind of talk about what we did last week. Last week we had Mark come in and talk about his experience play testing and being a difficult player, and why he's a difficult player, because he really wants to get it right, is what he really talked about last week. We also talked a little bit about games user research, just a little bit of an overview or a preview of what's going to happen for you next semester with whoever's going to teach that. And we also talked about user experience design for mobile games and how to do that. We touched upon play heuristics and what those are. We talked that's really a play evaluation. And we looked at things like Nielsen's heuristics for gameplay. Okay, so I asked you to do a little in-class exercise that was due last Friday. We also discussed things like the magic interface for mobile games. What is that? And it kind of ties into the same stuff that we've been working on this entire semester, which is give it some context. Anything you make with mobile games, actually, let's take that back. Anything you make with any game should be contextual to your game world. Should make sense. And we talked about narrative and world building and a bunch of things. And we also, I kind of put that video out there. I know that Stephen was talking to me about how some of you still have issues with building to Android into mobile. And I know that he fixed some of you during his tutorial. But again, I've also put together a process online. So you should have a couple videos by now that can help you put everything together for the things that are required, again, for an Android build. Okay, so that's happening. That's what happened last week. And so what are we doing this week? So this week we're talking about the app economy a little bit. So a bit more businessy stuff. A couple of case studies. One of them is something called app onboarding, which we're going to talk about today as well. And we're also going to have, we're going to talk about guide characters, what they are in mobile games and why they're important. We're going to do a small case study on Good Night Story, which is actually a game from 2016, which is pretty fun still. And characterization and character development in mobile games. We're going to wrap it up. That's what's happening this week. Okay. Any questions before I move on? Jaden says he's got some issues launching LD Player. Yep, you may have to reinstall. So before we get to that case study for Good Night Story, please reinstall, and so you can make sure you can download. You tried, huh? That means that you may need to uninstall completely and do a bit of a registry cleanup for your machine. So remove LD Player and then reinstall. Hopefully that might work for you. I'm hoping that's not going to kill you. Worst case scenario, I mean, there's other VMs out there as well, but Good Night Story would work great on something like LD Player. Okay, and again, you can use anything. You can use kind of BlueStacks or other Android emulators out there. All right, let's continue. So let's start with a recent snapshot of the app economy. So one of these, there's a company called Adjust, and they are an analytics company that kind of projects or kind of talks about some of the trends that they're seeing for mobile app development in 2021. And one of the things that they said is that app installs have increased by 50% from 2019 to 2020 across all verticals. That means fintech products like financial technology, all kinds of other products as well as games. Okay, so in installs, again, up by 31% in the first quarter of 2021 compared to the same time frame last year. Again, we're usually about 2 quarters behind. We're sitting right now in the last quarter of the year, each quarter being 3 months, right? So the last quarter of the year, but we're reporting here on the first quarter, and the reason for that is usually we're a couple of quarters behind in terms of analysis, right? So again, we can see that 31% installs and also sessions are lasting longer, and there's more of them in terms of the way we're using mobile. Well, why is that? We know what the cause of that is. One of them, at least one huge influence, is COVID. Okay, so the pandemic has really, pushed the number of apps that are being developed as well as the number of apps that are being consumed year over year. So that's one thing. Gaming reached terribly new heights in 2021, particularly in something called hyper-casual games, where installs really increased. Now, remember hyper-casual, what is that? Hyper-casual is like a mobile video game, which is really easy to play, usually free to play. They feature a very minimalistic user interface, so really super simple, quickly played after downloading, usually without any tutorial or instructions, and often using a 2D design with a simple color palette, and usually feature infinite looped mechanics. Here's a great example of that. Flappy Bird is a thing that happens. Yeah, free to play, typically. And that's part of the things that, we can also see that as freemium. So if we look at freemium, and a lot of times they're ad supported, all right, Jen. So that's what we're talking about, free to play. So, and that's what hyper casual games are. And that's what's really, is it easy to play? I don't think it's easy at all. But again, Flappy Bird would be one of the ones that would be considered something that is hyper casual. Yeah, rogue lights, sure, I like it. But at the end of the day, yeah, so extremely small. Ryan says Flappy Bird is relaxing when you get into a rhythm. Yeah, you can. There's a lot of other those kind of things that, you don't have to think much. That's the idea behind these games. This is like something where you can multitask. You can play this game and watch the show, that kind of stuff. It should be relaxing. I know some people don't find Flappy Bird relaxing at all, but that's what's hot, at least as of this recording. Let's continue with what we're talking about this week. So this week we're talking about characters in mobile and social games. And again, some people have said that, stories in mobile games, they don't really care about stories. But let's think about this for a second. Characters are story, and story is character. If you think about this, we've talked about this more and more. And the idea is that characters provide a focus for us to root for, and also someone to root against. So different kinds of characters, protagonists and antagonists, players and non-player characters. And one thing we're always looking for is a character that has both personality flaws and strengths. So a combination of both things. One thing that I always like to think about is a way of putting together, if I'm going to make a more complex game, and if I want to write a more complex story arc, a lot of times what I want to think about is the psychology of the personality of the character that I'm writing. So a lot of times I want to think about, does it make sense? And so I kind of flip to some psychology. And again, this isn't a psychology class, but we can think about things like that have been talked about in other courses. For example, something like trait theory. So if you look up trait theory, that personalities are made up of a bunch of different kinds of traits. Let's take a look at some of these images here, where you have the big five, which is a kind of a way of identifying, or I'm going to say classifying personality. And it may not work for us. Some people are really against personality tests, and I don't, to be honest with you, I'm not someone who is 100% sold on it, but I think there's a usefulness for it. Okay, so there's some really interesting charts that you can look at. For example, someone who has more of an extroverted personality or an introverted personality, someone who's more stable or unstable, and so on. And this kind of idea, this personality, the trait theory idea, is really great. I agree with you, Ethan. They should be taken with a grain of salt because it's difficult to categorize anybody. We don't want to put anyone in a bucket these days or try and put a label on anybody's personality in any way, especially now in 2021. But what we can do is look at these kinds of ideas and think about, how could I start writing a character that's more believable, as an example. And one of the ones I like to use is this one from Insights. So if you actually look at Insights Discovery, if we look that up, Insights Discovery, Insights was another system that you could use, and it was used in business a lot. And what they did was they had this kind of a wheel of personality, right? So what they do is they kind of do. Let's see if we can, if they still have this up as it was before. Really, it's a communication tool. Let's see if I can find one. The wheel. There's here it is. Here's the color wheel. So the way it used to work is something like this, where you had different colors and they mean different things. And so it starts off like this. I think this is a really simple system. Again, it's not part of our course, but I want to talk about it. Maybe you're going to see it in a, kind of organizational behavior course. I think there's a great organizational behavior course we run at Ontario Tech University. And if you're interested, they talk about trait theory, the big five, and so on, as well as psychology of character and archetypes. And what we're talking about here is like this idea of putting together a believable type. So one thing that we talk about with this diagram is that, the ones that are in opposition, fiery red, which is kind of opposite of earth green, it's typically not the way that characters work. It's not like you can be competitive and caring at the same time. So usually the opposites are not typically archetypal of the way things work in character. And usually what they do is they work in a wheel. So if you make a fire red kind of character, usually they either go this way in terms of personality preferences. So they might be a red, blue, earth, green. And by the way, what I mean by this is that everybody has every characteristic, every color, but just different preferences. For example, someone might be more energy in red, less in blue, less in earth green, and even less in yellow. Or it could be the other way. And depending on how you define your character, and I have whole classes on this, other classes that I talk about. But really what this is just identifying character and then starting to think about, what they're like on a good day or a bad day. So on a good day, a red person is competitive and demanding and determined and strong-willed and purposeful. On a bad day, they could be aggressive and controlling and driving and so on. And so there's other things out there. I'm not going to go into detail here because, again, it's out of scope of what we're talking about today. But how it links into what we're talking about here with personality flaws and strengths. There's a way of putting stuff together when you're writing a story, and you can kind of put together more of a complex character if you think about their psychology, why they do the things they do, what's their backstory, and so on. Ethan says, seeing different celebrities and fictional characters and Myers-Briggs tests is always interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, how they fit together. Myers-Briggs is kind of another system that we can use. It's different personality. I think it describes 16 personality types. And I think depending on the different systems, there's many systems out there that kind of try and categorize the personality types. And it all comes down from, Carl Jung, and as well as Sigmund Freud, when they started developing, the idea of personality. How can we categorize different people, personalities based on some traits that we can identify or observe? And one of the things we use that in real life is for communication. If I can identify what the other person is like in the real world, then what I can do is I can start communicating with them. And we can also do that with our characters. We can communicate with our characters in a similar way, where we can understand the characters can start speaking to us because they have a thing that they'll do. Think about this in Dungeons and Dragons. We've talked about Dungeons and Dragons narrative, kind of creation in Dungeons and Dragons, world building. You've seen Suncrest and some things. You build up a backstory for your world, and then what you start doing is you start thinking about how your characters are going to respond based on their personality, right? Which is what you want to do. And this is what this topic is all about today. So really, what we want to think about is creating characters. It doesn't just apply to traditional games like PC and console, but also social and mobile games. And well-written characters have a couple of really interesting parts to them, which is strong characterization. So the expression of a character's personality, motivations, desires, and usually we can see those things through dialogues and actions. Okay, that's the things that we use. And also character development. We want to see a change. And again, going back to that, the hero's journey that we talked about earlier this semester when Rui came in, it was like week 2. We talked about the hero's journey and how the hero goes from let's just pull up a graphic again, just so that we have more of something we can look at together. If I go hero's journey, you might see a graphic that's pretty cool. Let's take a look at the hero's journey. And usually this is some really great stuff that they have. I think this is probably an okay one TV tropes. We go from the normal world, right? And the journey, the hero gets a call to adventure. Remember how this works? They have some kind of threshold guardian that tells them that they shouldn't leave. They get the call to adventure, and what happens is they either forget, surpass, or overcome the threshold guardian, or they help them, or we move from the normal world into the special world, the hero, which is part of the hero's journey itself. They get a mentor, a helper. They might also have some tutorialization happening where they go through some trials, and they do their first, a bunch of trials. And then what ends up happening is they eventually die, and when I say die, I mean they stop being who they were and they transform into something that's different than where they started. And that transformation, they finally return back into the normal world, and they become master of both worlds, master of the normal world and the original world, the special world as well. So kind of interesting stuff. There's other ways of looking at it as well, where you have the call to adventure, supernatural aid. It's the same thing. There's a bunch of different pieces to the hero's journey, and there's some great graphics out there that can help you with that. But that journey itself is part of the story arc that we're talking about. And this story arc is something that you want to show character development in. The character should change. It should not stay the same from the beginning to the end. If they do in your story, then they're boring. And so too, it should be in games. That means that my character should be able to develop. My character should be able to learn. My character should be able to either weaken or get stronger. Something should happen with that character over time. When I say character, it could mean the character. It could mean your world. It could mean your characters if you're playing multiple characters at once. As an example, I think any of those things, as an example, is things that you want to make grow. You want to change things. And so you might have death of some character. If you're playing a party, you might have someone who's going to die, someone else who's going to join. It's going to go through transition and more metamorphosis, which is what we're thinking about. The caterpillar is going to become a butterfly or whatever it's going to happen with it. And that character development is what we're looking for well-written characters. So challenges, flaws, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about character development and flaws in our character here in Night Story, which we're going to talk about in a second. All right. And so one thing is we may not always write characters who are three-dimensional, right? So again, if you're making a puzzle game, a lot of times, your character could be the world, and it may not be as three-dimensional as an example, someone who is a character in a role-playing game, as an example, right? Now we're talking about role-playing games. We're talking about role-playing games and narrative for this entire semester so far. So obviously we're talking about those, but the idea here is that there might be characters who we only see one time, right? Who introduce us, they're non-play characters a lot of times, and they introduce us to a different part of the game world. Or what they do is they can help us progress, as an example, from one place or one quest to the other. Maybe they are our mentors, or are, if you think about the call to adventure and the hero's journey. Let's go back to that little map. It doesn't matter which one you pick, by the way. Any one of these is very interesting. But this idea of a helper or a mentor, a lot of times characters or NPCs in our games end up taking this role on, where they become the helper or the mentor, as an example. And sometimes they even turn on us and become our antagonists for a while. So it's really interesting how that works. And really what we want to do with this lesson, these things that we're talking about, is talk about some traditional and non-traditional techniques for narrative design. And when we write about mobile games, what do we do? And what we want to start thinking about is, let's think about some roles that maybe aren't in traditional games as much. And one things that we're going to have, that's different in mobile games that we have in traditional games, is we have a unique burden because they're kind of tied into social networks as well. And one thing that we're always going to notice, we're going to see this in a lot of mobile games, is, especially now the newer ones, we're going to see it in today's example, is they're greeted often by some kind of guide character. Some kind of guide character that's going to come in and say, hey, let me help you get through this tutorial. And a lot of times it makes it a little bit more interesting for us than just having some kind of step through or something like that. We'll talk about different kinds of tutorialization in a bit, but really the guide character is kind of the central thing that we're talking about in many ways today. All right, so that is kind of our prologue or intro to what we're talking about. Let's think about this idea of app onboarding. Remember, the guide character is supposed to make our lives easier, the transition, as an example, from not knowing what this game is about to knowing what this game is about. And the guide character is super important because it also has a personality. So let's think about what this app onboarding thing is. And I've kind of made this a little case study. So there's a few slides specifically for app onboarding, not necessarily targeting mobile games, but any app that you make with mobile nowadays. Okay. Remember, we talked about some metrics, app metrics. They also apply to different kinds of apps and also the web. And so too, does it make sense for any kind of application that we're going to create, especially now with our limited attention and the ability for us to be bombarded with different apps or games that are going to try and kind of distract us from the thing that we're playing or looking at. Okay, so let's think about app onboarding, which is really a crucial step in maintaining or retaining or attracting users to our app. And what it is it ensures that users understand how the app works. In this case, the app is our game. And right after it gets installed, as soon as the app gets installed, we start understanding how to play this thing. If users don't understand the app after installing, they're less likely to use it again. And I'm going to give you some stats around this later on today in today's lecture. And from the perspective of mobile games, app onboarding is really helping players understand how to play the game. How do I play this thing? How do I use the mechanics and so on, right? The quicker players understand the gameplay, the faster they enjoy the experience, and that's the idea that we can hook them in, and that's what we want to do with games. Again, when we think about onboarding, it's a process, and it's really the first impression of your app or game that you're making. And again, what we're hoping is that your app or game is adopted, and that means that they start using it, they start playing it. Even if it's for a short time, it might accomplish its goals, all right, if it's even for a short time that they're doing it. And really what we want to think about is onboarding really reinforces your app's value. What is it that is different about your app or game, as an example, that's not out there already? Or maybe it's like the same, again, the old Hollywood saying, which is, give it to me the same, only different. And we've talked about this a couple of times this semester. So we want to say, what are the key benefits and features, or what are the changes what things differentiate my game from things that are very much like it out there, right? So really a strong onboarding process is super essential to your game's success, and player retention rates increase up to 50% after implementing a solid onboarding process, which is what we really want to see, right? So player retention, which is huge. Let's think about 7 app onboarding best practices that we want to talk about. So here are they. They're right here listed for you. Emphasize your value proposition. Again, what makes your game different than every other game that's out there that's similar to yours. Highlight core features, right? Think about the things that your mechanics, all right, as an example, or your aesthetics, or your dynamics, what makes your game interesting and fun to play. Only ask for what you need, right? Sometimes we have to ask permissions. We're going to talk about that. Don't overwhelm users and keep it quick, all right? Avoid the obvious, as an example, and make it easy to sign up. And finally, end with a call to action, which really is our call to adventure, if you think about it, for the user, the player. We want to give them the call to adventure. Hey, play our game, try it out. That kind of stuff, which is really, a CTA is what they call it, call to action. Let's think about how we emphasize our value proposition. So again, people don't really care about features, all right? Never necessarily. What they care about is what we can do with those features. So always lead with what your app is about, all right? So if you're making a game, it's a puzzle game, make sure that, as an example, your players know what kind of game you're making before they even download it, right? It's got to be very in their face. The graphics got to be there. The story of what this game is about should be right there in front of everyone. They should know what they're downloading. If they know what they're getting, they're less likely to uninstall it later on if they've got the wrong kind of game. So make sure that what you describe your game as, especially when it comes to your value propositions, is exactly what your game is about. Okay. There's nothing worse than us going on to Steam or some other platform and then downloading a game that says it's supposed to be the strategy game and it's something totally different. It's something like it's a terrible game that we never wanted in the first place. We just uninstall it within the first day. So let's take a look at something. Here's an example of GasBuddy. This is just an app that used to exist. It allows users to compare gas prices while traveling and informs users up front that the app can be used to help fuel their journey by offering real-time reviews. All right, so that's kind of interesting. So that's what it does. It's almost like a start screen that says, hey, this is what this thing is about, kind of stuff. And a lot of times we have starter screens for our games that do the exact same thing, okay? Jonathan says, advertise offline game, but reality it's all online. Yeah, that's a terrible experience, isn't it? Or you try and play the game, it says free, and it's not really free. It's actually, there's in-app purchases, and the only way you can play the game is to pay to play or pay to win. That's a terrible experience. We don't want to do that with our players. We want them to know what they're getting, right? Which is important. So that's kind of number one when it comes to onboarding best practices. Number two, highlight core features. Okay, so example, one of the things we talked about when Google Docs first came out, they talked about how word compatibility was a thing. They were like, wait, I don't want to use Google Docs because then what about my Microsoft stuff? Can I still use Google Docs with Word? Yes, absolutely, it can convert. But before, when it first came out, it was a thing. It was like, should I use Google Docs? Right now, many of us do. So again, what you want to highlight here is your key functionality, and then you want the app to help them, if it's an app, help them complete a desired task. If it's a game, help them do or give them the gameplay experience that you've promised them. So first you promise something. This is my value proposition. Then you give it to them, whatever you promised. Talk the talk and then walk the walk, kind of thing. Walk the talk, however you want to say it, right? But basically what you're saying is you're going to deliver, you're delivering here in this second step. Okay, so what is the thing that you're talking about? And make sure that they can get to those important features or concepts, dynamics, whatever you want to call it, as soon as possible. Get them right into that main core concept of the game, right? Whatever it is. Sometimes our apps will request data access and messaging permissions. A lot of times we only want to ask them, let's say, for example, voice access or camera access sometimes as well. Only ask the user for the thing that you absolutely need and make sure your app does that. So if you need data access and you need to ask for them, that's all you're asking for. Don't ask for everything under the sun they're going to click on. You don't want to bombard users. Studies show that 60% of users say that they have chosen not to install an app after discovering how much personal information the app is asked for, especially a game. Imagine if your game is asking for some kind of personal information. If you can get them not to log in to your server or something else like that, if they can just play the game without doing that, or it's transparent, or if it's a one-time cost, so you're getting them to do it one time in the beginning and never again, you never want the user to keep logging into your game over and over again, because that is an obstacle to play the game every single time. The more they do that, the less chance they're going to come back and play it again. Okay, that's something that we've learned through analysis. And so only ask for essential permissions. And here's an example of an old app called Skype Quick. Gone, all right? It was there, but what they said is, hey, first things first, we need you to have access to your contacts. Can you give me access to your contacts? That's pretty personal. And, but what we want to do is don't ask for nice to have permissions. Keep them out until maybe you can engage them later on. You might ask for something else. But in the beginning, when they start playing, don't ask them for stuff that you don't need. Only ask them for the permissions that are required. Next one is don't overwhelm the users and keep it quick. So in other words, when it comes to your app onboarding experience, yeah, can you imagine? A calculator that makes phone calls. Hey, do you mind? It's going to make phone calls for you too, my calculator. No, please don't do that. So let's stick to the basics. So we don't want to go through a dozen screens before we get into the app, okay? I don't need text-heavy explanations. And this is going to tie right into what we're talking about today with guide characters. All right. So I'd rather opt for, because remember, our app, our game, if you think about it, is a interactive media, a medium, if you will, right? So use screenshots, illustrations, and an interactive tutorial as opposed to text-heavy or walls of text. We never want to see walls of text when it comes to tutorialization. That kind of links directly to what James has told you before, with your game design, right? No walls of text, please. Ignore, kind of remove them as much as possible. One thing you want is, if you're going to have multiple screens, one feature explanation per screen max. Okay, you don't want to say, hey, this is how you move, this is how you kind of get points, this is how you do that, don't do that. All right, one screen, one explanation is what you want. And one thing they also have is we usually have little indicators in the app or in the game that tells us how to do something. There's little ellipses or sometimes there are parallax images at the bottom of your app, and that tells us that you're getting, you're kind of going through, giving us a progress indicator or a status. Hey, last week we talked about Nielsen's heuristics, right, which is availability of system status. This is an exact, kind of reflection of how this does not violate that heuristic, that we want basically the availability of, hey, how are we getting through this tutorial, and can I skip it? One thing that this doesn't say here is I should be able to skip my tutorial if I want to figure things out on my own. That's totally up to me, because then I have agency, whether I'm the user getting into the game or even playing the game. I want agency in all parts of it, right? So skipping the tutorial should be something that I'm allowed to do, right? Avoid the obvious. We know that a camera icon is probably going to be related to a native camera or something like that. Things like liking, favoriting, sharing, all those kind of icons or things that are affordances. We talked about this last week with UI. We want to bring in affordances from the real world into our mobile game, and don't use random symbols that don't mean anything in the real world or that you've never seen before, unless you're going to train the user what those symbols mean. As an example, when they play your specific game. Okay, so that's one thing to note there, that you want to make them contextual and something that is brought in. Remember, it's recognition rather than recall. Back to what we talked about last week, right? Recognition rather than recall. I'm going to recognize my symbols. Don't try and train me on what a camera symbol means, because it should be obvious. All right. Make it easy to sign up. If they're going to sign up for your server or whatever, and they're going to, you want to ask them to kind of put in their username and password, make it super easy. In fact, maybe make it optional for them to log in with something like Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc. And there's a process called OAuth that I want to talk about here as an aside. Okay, here's OAuth as an aside. What is OAuth? This is now, we're going back from business to technical. Okay, if you're going to build a security system, we may want to use something called OAuth, which is open authorization. And what it is it's a standard for access delegation. What it creates is a relationship, a three-way relationship between yourself, the system that you're talking about. Jonathan says, get cracking every time you try and push a big command. I know. Yourself, the system that's authorizing you, and then a third party that's basically telling the system that, hey, they know who you are, right? You're not some hacker, and it's okay for you to store your credentials with them, and that you should trust, that the system should trust you, because Google and Microsoft and GitHub and Amazon and Facebook, they trust you. So because they trust you, then your system, this little system that you're making for the users, you should trust them too. That's what it means. And actually, a lot of, OAuth token is invalid. No, don't do it, man. It's terrible. But yeah, sometimes that happens. And OAuth kind of looks like this. It says, so here's my, the user, my client, as an example. And the client, basically, there's two ways of looking at this. You can look at it this way or this way. I like this way a lot, this kind of three-way relationship between the client, the resource owner, as an example. So the person, that's you. You're going to make, you're creating a resource. For example, you're making a game, and you want your client, which is the player, to play your game and log into your server. We're going to talk about multiplayer, this semester as well, right? And when they log into your server, you want them to be authenticated somehow. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can store your their authentication credentials. So that's username, password, or some other kind of technique, strategy, if you will, authentication strategy. Or forget that, you can use an OAuth strategy. And basically what you're saying is, because Google trusts that player, well then so do you. Three-way kind of trust scenario. Leo says, signing in with Google other accounts are huge. Makes you feel like you don't have to really sign up, but you get an account, making the barrier basically non-existent. And I totally agree with that. Look, you know what? Whenever I have a chance to sign in with Google or GitHub or Microsoft or something, I totally want to do that because I have Google and GitHub and Microsoft accounts. I don't want to make a new account. And this is what this is saying. Don't make the user sign up if they don't have to. Give them an opportunity to ease the barrier to entry to your application and your server by using OAuth, which is really a secure delegated access technique that we're talking about, okay? And you can do that. OAuth is available to you when you create your servers on the back end, because remember, there's two parts of doing multiplayer we're going to talk about. One is, kind of your authentication. Who are you? Identity, right? And the other thing is authorization. What are you able to do? Now that I know who you are, let's suppose this guy, Tom, I know who Tom is, but what can Tom do? What is Tom allowed to do? That's authorization compared to authentication, which is going to learn more about this next semester with distributed networking that you're taking. All right, so the last thing you want to do is you want to end with a call to action. All right, so that means that, hey, you know what? Use my app, play the game. There should be a big play button. As an example, it says like, now that you know what my game is about, you've signed up for my game, play it, go, right? There should be that play button that'll ask you to do that. And here's an example of Cinch, which basically says here, like, ask a question about what you want to do. Cinch is kind of a way of, they deliver kind of a experience for sports and all that kind of stuff that's in here. And it's still an app that works today. Okay, what about onboarding design? We've talked about onboarding. This is what this little section is about, onboarding. Onboarding means, how am I going to bring the user in? How am I going to retain that user? And especially for day two. Day one, they're going to install their application, your game. And day two, I want to keep them, right, as an example. And day two is critical, guys. We'll talk about day two. And again, this isn't a business course, but I want you to be business-minded here when you're creating your application. You're spending a lot of time, effort with you and your team creating an app, your game, whether it's a console game, whether it's a PC game, whether it's a mobile game, it's the same concept here. So there's two ways of designing your onboarding process. One of them is some kind of coach screens, all right? And the other one is interactive tutorials. Let's talk about both for a second, and then we'll move on from this part. So coach screens, all right? So here's an example. Your app screens that introduce value and key features, right? Users swipe through the screens to understand what they're like, right? And when using coaching screens, focus on one concept per screen like we talked about before. Again, no walls of text, make it image heavy for the most part, give directions that are very, very clear, make it as interactive as you can, even when these kind of screens are happening. And again, colorful, interesting to look at screens, okay? That's what you're looking at with coach screens is what they're called. The other way of doing it is some kind of interactive tutorial, all right? So here's an example of both Pinterest and Snapchat, all right? That gives you the same idea. Would they actually get you to do, drop a new pin create your first pin, or Snapchat walks you through how to do your first snap, all right, as an example, right? And again, same thing with TikTok, same thing in all those big apps. From a social networking perspective, they kind of walk you through how to do the first set of interactions, right? Rather than having explanatory screens, this is just a much better, more robust way of doing it than that. And for us, guys, which one is better? Do you think it's better? I've seen both, by the way, with apps. I've seen an app that does coach screens, and another one that does interactive tutorials, also known as tutorialization. And I much prefer the tutorialization approach because at least I can learn. One thing we also talked about, because we've talked about UI last week, which was kind of led into this week, which is just-in-time learning. I don't want to learn something that's going to be cold storage. I don't want to kind of learn something and then I'm never going to use it again, or I'm going to use it like, on the boss level. I want to learn only the things that I need just before I need to use them. Okay, and this way I can start using them more and more. Otherwise, I'm going to forget. Remember, I want to be trained. I don't want to remember too much stuff. I want to only use it. The more I use it, the more I'm able to use it and remember how to do it. Okay, so that's app onboarding. Any ideas or any comments around app onboarding? You guys have seen good app onboarding, and I'm talking about like anything from the apps you download that are utility applications as well as games. Okay, so how do they onboard you? What are the techniques that they use to make you come back, or make you even come back for day 2? You've installed your app, and sometimes we'll download something from Steam or some other provider, and we download the app, we try it out, and we're like, meh, and we don't use it anymore. Right? Why is that? Did they kind of do what they promised that they were going to do? All right. Are their value proposition? They kind of promised a value proposition or a value promise. Did they follow up with that and then deliver on that promise? If they didn't deliver, you have a setup without a payoff. And we're going to talk about setups and payoffs when it comes to storytelling. A lot of times it's like what Rui said in our talk with him in week 2. He said that. He said, every scene should have a purpose when it comes to your game. Every quest should have a purpose. There should be a setup, and at the end, there should be some kind of payoff. If there's no setup or payoff, then there's no reason for that quest or scene or whatever to exist, right, in the story that you're making, right? Sometimes we want story should also go from a negative to a positive, or a positive to a negative. Something should happen. There should be a conflict in each chapter, each story part. There should be some kind of conflict or a rising or falling action. There should be something. If the story is the same from one chapter to the other, question, do you need that chapter in the story? Do you need that quest if it's the exact same that they've had before, right? Because it makes it very boring and there's nothing that changes. The character doesn't change, as an example. Do we really care is the question. Let's talk about the guide character a little bit. The guide character. One thing is that when we think about it, we talked about player retention, right? And when we think about player retention here, right? It's crucial, critical for the life of a mobile game, right? On average, 20 to 40% of players return to a game after day 1 install, right? 20 to 40% on average, right? If the game has 30% on day 2, guys, that is a huge success, because even though we've lost 70% of our game, look at like how it falls off. And by the way, by day 28, we've lost 90% of our audience by day 28 when it comes to a game. Most people don't play a game for that long, all right? We're looking at the first 7 days is where we have the majority of our gameplay, the first 7 days. And that's for every genre, action, adventure, cards and board games, family, gambling, strategy, whatever. Every kind of genre. Within the first 7 days, we have the most play, the most engagement. After that, it tapers off. And now what we want to try and do is have that game last as long, Clash is an exception for sure, but have that game last as long as possible, right? That tail to be as long as possible. And then how do you get players back? DLCs. You have another DLC and another DLC. And the timing has to be really, if you think about it, it has to be perfect. Think about Fortnite when it first came out as beta. Every week almost there was something new. And every month there was something else that basically brought us from down here back up to here again and back. And it kept on seesawing up and down, trying to retain you and bring you back. Hey, guess what? There's another battle pass. There's something else that's happening. The game is still living. There's more players. We're adding something new. We added a new character. We added a new character from a different franchise. We want to attract you back into the game. And we want to do that by continuously adding content throughout the entire time the game is alive, right? As much as possible. So guide characters are actually central to all this, right? If you think about it, this is part of the onboarding process. So again, what is a guide character? It's a non-player character who shows up immediately after players start and guide the player throughout the tutorials, right? Guide characters do everything from explaining mechanics to showing players where to tap controls or access menus, all kinds of stuff. And because of this, right, you need to write them a little differently when they first appear before the player, okay? So that's the first thing. And let's think about this, right? Their dialogue must be concise and clear. And while this is the case for all characters, I mean, you don't want your dialogue to be messy. And we're going to talk about dialogue in a future lesson here, right? Remember that their responsibility is to keep the player playing the game, right? That's the responsibility. So if you think about it, it's kind of controversial, right? You're trying to get the player invested in some sense in your guide character a little bit. The guide character should be interesting. If they're boring, we never want to see that guide character again. We want to skip. We don't want to ever talk to that guide character. Well, that's bad. And so they're, in a way, a little bit like an instruction manual, an interactive instruction manual on how to play the game. That's what the guide character is. Again, you guys should all know this from playing multiple games, but we're being explicit here and talking about it. So really, when we think about the guide character's dialogue, it's accompanied by some kind of visuals, animated icons, blinking arrows, pulsing buttons, something that's going to make it interesting, right? And what we want is we want the guide character to work in tandem with the tutorial's visuals and sounds. So guys, technical artists out there, sound engineers, this is where you really, kind of pull your weight when it comes to making the aesthetic kind of jive for your guide character. The guide character, in many ways, has to work just like UI elements and other interactions. The entire tutorial itself, right, should fit in the game's genre and aesthetic. Okay, it can't be like you're making a character that doesn't make sense for the entire game. I'm going to talk about this because it's funny how this game we're going to talk about in a second works. All right. And after the tutorial gets players comfortable, guide characters, wherever possible, right, should have an in-universe reason for helping the player. So why are they helping me is your question. Why am I playing this game? Why am I fighting these aliens? Your questions for why should all be answered. Why am I doing this thing? Why, right? Why? Narrative. Why? Story. That's why, right? And if you think about it here, I don't know if you guys have tried Anno 1800. It's not a mobile game, but it's a great little strategy game. And again, it's inside the whole Anno series. But Arhant, this guy here, he's the first guy who introduces you to the first part of the quest and how to build. It's like almost like a city builder. There's resource challenges in terms of collecting resources and fighting off enemies and so on. Lots of really cool things. Kind of a mix between pirates and city skylines, civilization, that kind of stuff. It's kind of really interesting how this works, right? So great game, really addictive. Beware if you're going to download it, but it's really, really quite interesting. But anyways, this guy, he comes on and he shows you, he says, hey, you need to, I'm trying to help you here. Do this. He tells you what to do. He's kind of the guide character in the game. And then later on, we see that he's actually a character that's there to help you out. He becomes an NPC and he's going to outlast the tutorial, right? So after the tutorial is done, he's there. He's part of our world, right? He's going to be there to help us in other parts. We're going to develop a relationship with this guy. He's going to be our right-hand dude, if you will, right? And he's going to help us, right, throughout the entire campaign, if you will, of the game world. Right from the beginning. He's not only our mentor, but also he's going to be our follower at the end. So this is also kind of tapping into a couple things, right? One thing is our character is showing growth, right? Because the mentor is now becoming the follower. It happens a lot with guide characters, right? And we're moving on. He's helping us, at different times. He's telling us things that we need to do when we need to do them at different critical points in our game. So really great game, Anno 1800. Check it out if you ever have time in this crazy world. All right. Here's the fun part of what I wanted to do tonight with you guys, right? Which is our case study for Good Night Story. So Good Night Story. This is kind of interesting. So guide characters, right? Think about this. They're created with some kind of in-universe motivation and perspective, right? And they're not only helpful to the player, but also have some kind of believable motivations for their involvement, which enhance the game's storytelling, right? So if you think about this, that's what the guide character is there. So what is Good Night Story? Good Night Story is kind of a puzzle adventure game, kind of. It's kind of interesting, kind of a mishmash of two things. It reminds me a lot of those other puzzle games. Again, I would say it's even in many ways a type of hyper casual game, right? But it's a puzzle game, so it's kind of interesting. it will wait for you. It's turn-based. It's not something that it's gonna, it's not in real time a lot of times. So it's not like it won't wait for you. You can turn it off and come back. It's gonna be right there where you left it, which is pretty cool. And it's so simple. The graphics are so interesting, and the if you notice here, the colors are so vivid that they attract you, just like they would for other types of game of the same genre. All right, that you're gonna see that you've seen before. So that's what this game is called. So what we have here is the leprechaun. So I know this is kind of like not the most exciting thing, but the leprechaun is, in Goodnight Story, he puts a spin really on the guide character when it comes to his personality, because the Goodnight Story is a puzzle game with RPG elements. All right, so there's a reason why the leprechaun is there. It has a fixed PC, right? A vain, disrespectful, and reckless knight. So really, if you think about it, so from the character portrait, the leprechaun looks like he's ready to spar. He's sarcastic and mocks the knight half the time. But while this isn't really typical behavior for the guide character, it fits Goodnight Story's overall aesthetic and story. And let me tell you why. Because the game's protagonist isn't a good guy. He's actually a bad guy, right? And that's what this guy is. He's really something like, despicable in some ways. He's not really cool. Some of the dialogue that he says, and some of the ways he, kind of destroys the monsters and so on, not the most favorable thing. And we'll talk about how this works, and we'll try and play the game together, and we'll go through it, and you'll see for yourself how it works. And so what the leprechaun doesn't really treat him like one, though, even though he helps him and tells him what to do as the knight advances through the levels. He does that. But it's like the leprechaun appears to be a figment of the knight's imagination, right? So really, he wants the knight to succeed, the leprechaun does, because the knight's life is his life too. They're kind of tied together. If the knight stops believing in him, the leprechaun will disappear and die, right? So really, the leprechaun has to help him from those reasons alone. So it makes sense that he would tell the knight how to solve certain puzzles, because if he doesn't, and if he doesn't come into being, if he's not part of his story, the the knight will ignore him, and we won't care about him anymore. So he'll disappear. This is the idea as part of the story. Okay, so let's try it together now. Let's open LD Player, and this is the interactive part of our night tonight. Let's download and install Goodnight Story. Right, it's free to play, and I'll say freemium, right, free to play. And let's play a little bit to get a sense of the gameplay. So let's do that now. So I've already gone ahead and done that. I know, it's crazy, right? I'm telling you to download stuff. It's amazing, right? So here it is. Here's Goodnight Story. Okay. And I'll wait for you guys to download it too. It's kind of really simple. If you go to LD Player, if you're using LD Player like me, you can search for it. You can just put in Goodnight Story. If you type it in, it'll bring up, this thing is from Turbo Chili. They're the people who make this, right? Which is kind of cool. Okay, a couple things to note before you download. Take a look at what it says. Remember, we talked about onboarding here, right? So, contains ads and in-app purchases. It tells you right away. And again, now it's required, but before it wasn't, right? You can, convince the player to download stuff, and they wouldn't know what they're getting into, right? It gives you your rating, of course, and a bunch of reviews, 1 million plus downloads, right? And so what does it say? Join our unlikely hero as he solves puzzles and battles monsters. All right, so that's what he does, solves puzzles, but they got a little bit of a video of how to do it, of course, and they give you a few screens of what it looks like. It looks like an RPG with puzzle elements, which is kind of neat. All right, so that's what it is. All right, so that is Goodnight Story. Hopefully you've downloaded that, and we can try it out together, right? Yes, it'll ask you, so this is one thing it does. It'll ask you to connect. Yeah, I like that too for Google Play for sure. It kind of does tell you whether it's good or not in some ways. But again, I mean, one thing with Android games, we talked about this before, iOS games make more money in general, but Android games, the way we know that they're good is if they get good reviews, solid reviews, and lots of downloads. If you see a lot of downloads, you know the game is probably good. All right, so let's get into this. I'm going to play Night Story here, or Goodnight Story. I'm going to bring it up. Notice as soon as I play, hopefully you guys can hear this. Let me know if you guys can hear this or not. Here's Turbo Chili. I want to play it with you guys. And let's just kind of reduce all this other noise. So all we see is this as we go forward. All right. Yes? No? You can hear it? All right. A couple of things. I want to start, and it's going to ask me to log in. All right. So you see, he was with a bunch of unsavory characters. There's a bit of an eye, and where am I? Okay. Where am I? That's what he says. So tap to continue. Typical app. Puny Knight, you are in the dungeons. Tap to continue. It's a feisty little blob. Okay, let me just turn down some of the volume here so you don't have, you're not crazily bombarded with this. It's a feisty little blob. Surely dispatching will be no prob. Bit of a rhyme. Kind of goes in with what a leprechaun might say. All right, as an example. And let's click on it. A leprechaun, what? What happened to me last night? You know? And then it tells you what to do. You see a little hand here that basically guides you, interactive tutorial, right? So you kind of do it. And then smashes this little blob, right? And it says, you're nearly done. Make a chain of 3 or more to finish the fun. Okay, cool. Again, a rhyme for his dialogue. Very, very intelligent. You kill him. There's a little bit of mashing, and it says, hey, you can make a chain that can be diagonal. No problem. Let's do that. Right? And it says, when the counter gets to 0, the spider is going to attack you. This is interesting. So let's see what happens. But we can connect to protect yourself from attacks. I got this, right? Finish him, create more chains, and put the end to this creature. All right, cool. So now let's take a look. Now we're left to it. So we've shown how to do chains and everything else. We want to attack him, and we're going to use any chain we can find. You can do the same thing. I see a big chain right here. Let's do it. So, okay. He's dead, right? Yay, we won. We get some experience. We press OK. And now here's something that comes up for our game. We get some stars for rewards, and there's this double coins thing. Guys, don't press this right now. If you do, it'll take you to another game, and you'll check it out. This is the incentive for you. If you want to get double the coins, you basically press this little thing. It'll take you to an ad. It's ad supported, another game that you're going to try and get you to play, and that's how they make their money. Every single time that you do that, you try another game, they get a bit of a microtransaction that's happening here for them, where they get more and more kind of ad money more than anything else. Okay, let's press OK. We're not going to do that right now. Press OK. And let's go to the next thing. Simple map. You can see the entire narrative, right? Hex Knight, yeah. Interesting. Awesome. Well, that's what happens. You have games that are the games that are copied from one kind to the other. This was a successful game, so obviously Hex Knight came out with another one. All right, let's do this. Let's play the next one. It says defeat 3 monsters now. So now they're adding. So they're telling us what to do. This is a transition screen that's telling us, hey, we're going to go to the next screen here, and we're going to battle 3 monsters. There's 2 different types, right? Let's try this out. All right, so we're there, and now a new mechanic comes up. Exactly what we talked about before. Did I imagine a leprechaun? All right, so in other words, this is part of the story elements, right? Which is like, hey, maybe I'm imagining things, right, as an example. All right, that's pretty cool. And now you can see that that's a pretty cool loading screen. I agree that someone commented from YouTube. So let's take a look here. So now we have, again, look at the user interface elements. This is really interesting for me, right? You have a progress bar for the hero. You have a progress bar for the enemy. And now we know what this means. This means something. We know that there's 3 attacks that I can possibly make before they attack me. We also have a new symbol that we've never seen before. Okay, let's click on the screen here. The leprechaun will come up and tell us what it is. Too much orc juice will do that, it says, because he's telling us why we're imagining the leprechaun, right? And he says, to finish a level, complete the goals, this skull are monsters left to defeat. So it tells us what to do. There's a flashing indicator, a flashing arrow, like we talked about before, right? So all the same stuff that it talks about. Cool. And let's do it. Let's attack the first time. We can clearly see that we have a nice chain there. We have a smaller chain there and there. And we have some shields over here we can use later on. Let's try this big chain right here. Bump, 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 right? So now we have 2 more attacks left before they come at us, right? Okay, cool. Let's try it again. So I'm going to try a different type of attack. That was really effective. And let's try it again. Uh-oh. He's at 0 and he's got 1 health left, right? So that means I'm probably going to get attacked next. Let's use shields. Yeah. Really cool. So I've learned, right? And I've got 3 more attacks before he attacks once. Well, it doesn't matter. He's got like 1 health left. No matter what I do to him, I'm going to kill him, right? Okay, cool. I got, like 1 more guy left. Okay, now this guy seems tougher. Stop right there, right? We don't want you to miss your head cut appointment. Okay, head cut. Cool. He's going to try and kill us, right? And all right, we got a bunch of other things here. Let's use some fire. Cool. We have 2 attacks left. Now let's look at some chains to make this more interesting, right? We have chains that we can do it. We have all these. Let's do those. So it looks like the more complex chains they are, the more I can get attacks. Kind of neat. Let's do this kind of thing here. Let's do a 5er. Uh-oh. Better kill him now or I'm in trouble, right? So let's do a smaller chain. He's done. And some interesting graphics there for killing. I'm done. And now he says, you killed my brother, prepare to die. And again, this is nice that they did this. This kind of ties into other genres that we've this is the Princess Bride. You've killed my father, prepare to die. Prepare to die comes from the Princess Bride. They've stolen that. But we've seen this dialogue before. So again, recognition, right? It might make you laugh. That's the idea. It's a humor type game, right? Okay, cool. So now we have some other chains we can look at. Again, we want to look at more complex ones. Look at this one. This is pretty big, right? So let's do this one. Do, right? Bam. Oh, it didn't affect him that much, actually. And I attacked him 3 times. Whoa, look at this massive one right here with fire. Oh, that's a super one, right? What? He has 1 health left? That's terrible. What the heck? Let's do another big one to really smash him down. Overkill. And now we have our treasure chest. Again, a new mechanic comes in, right? As we come forward, he tells us to break the chest. And the idea here is to get as many of these items as we want, as we can connect with. Okay, we see there's a big chain right here. Let's do that. So boom, 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 boom. Right? Oh, okay, so we broke it. Item unlocked. I get a gift, which is a sword. And we're done. I get some points. And it basically tells me at the end that, okay, we got some stuff. Do you want to get double the coins? If you do, no problem. This is the way you do it. But I can continue playing, which is really good. It gives me the opportunity to not do this if I don't want to, and to play slower, right? Or I can do what they're telling me. I want to get more of an attack. Okay, that's what I want to choose to go to. I level up. My character has improved. My character has moved forward. And it also tells me I got a new mechanic happening, which I found a rusty sword. Let's do that. And when I do that, I can equip the rusty sword. There it is. So now I've got a rusty sword instead of my fists, which is pretty cool. Let's see if I can continue, right? So let's go. Back to the next level. I'm not going to do this too much longer, guys, but I wanted to show you the progression here for you guys to see it and what the role of the guide character is, which is something that's the most interesting. All right, so he runs in there. He's in some kind of cavern now. He says brains, so it's obviously some kind of zombie. And it says that zombie wants to eat your brain. Poor fool, not much of a snack, okay? And it says some monsters have a weakness. Okay, new mechanic now that he's introducing. It's showing us this thing, right? It says choose an attack that is strong against their weakness. Take a look. There's arrows that are here, and it's always it's always been part of our screen the entire time. So if it's green, that means red is its weakness. Red chomps green. Green chomps this kind of purple color. Purple chomps blue, and so on. Okay, this is the new mechanic. We never saw this before. It's always been part of our UI, but now we're starting to realize what it is. Okay, cool. Let's try this out. So that means that I want to use fire because fire trumps whatever this poison skull is or whatever. Let's do that. So fire, it's telling me what to do. And you can see it did a lot of damage versus the zombie, right? So fire is the tool that I want to use. I definitely don't want to use this. This is not its weakness, these skulls, right? It's fire. What about if I use something like this, right? If I use ice, does it do anything? Well, in this case, he's only got one health left, so of course it'd be okay. But you're going to see that some attacks are more, useful than others. All right, so again, we don't have, it goes me smash little knight. He comes up. Were you paying attention before? Just in case, I'll explain it again. So he's telling us, help us, so we can, again, remember we talked about this last week. This is error prevention. Hey, are you sure you did this right? You know what you need is fire to attack him because he's a big guy. He's got 80 health compared to your 15, right? And we're already at number 2. Remember we started at 3 with the easy monsters. This guy starts at 2, which means after 2 attacks, he's going to get an attack on me, right? So I need to use fire. Some monsters have weaknesses. Choose an attack that is strong. It's telling us again. And it's even telling us how this works. Fire is strong against this green skull. Green skulls are strong against this kind of a lightning. Purple lightning. Purple lightning is strong against ice. And ice is strong against fire. So this kind of circle of, power, which reminds me a lot of Magic the Gathering for some reason, right? It shouldn't, but it does, right? So it's kind of tapping into some, kind of things that have already been out there, games that we've seen before, which is kind of neat. All right, so let's try this again. All right, so we need to use fire, but we don't have any fire. And this guy, we're not going to use shields because shields are for defense only. So we want to kind of create a chain that is okay. We obviously don't want to, we want to save some of these for later. Here's an example. If I choose to use this now, right, it's a crazy attack, right? But it's not his weakness. So take a look at that. It only took him down like from 80 to 58. What a waste that was, right? So that's what they're trying to say to us. So we need to use fire. So fire combinations like this. This is probably going to be more effective, these little 3, than that big one that I just did. So let's do that. Let's try this out and see what happens. This is our second attack. Look at that. Oh, it chomped him down. That's truly his weakness. But we won't be able to do that again because we don't have another combination like that. So the idea is, can we somehow combine these things so that we can attack again? All right. So a couple things. We could use a shield now to help him attack and give us another chance to do it, right? I can look above the monster's head. Okay, maybe. It shows you the damage you did. Very cool. Very cool. I love it. All right, so let's take a look at that. So I'm going to use a shield, and I'm going to defend. Let's see if I can defend. Oh, I took a little bit of damage, but now I'm back to 2, which is kind of the thing. And I want to be able to hit him with, some kind of other things. Let's try this out, right? 24, right? So to here, to here, to here, to here. 44. I'm definitely going to kill him. I don't have to use all that. It's overkill. I can go down definitely to here, and that would be enough. Like you said. Overkill. Pretty cool. So cool, right? Pretty good. I'm done now. I can use my my chest. Now this is where I didn't plan properly because the more power you use against the chest, the more points you get actually at the end from what I saw. So I can probably do something like this, which isn't terribly bad, but it's not great either. Hey, item unlocked. I got a heart. I got some more stuff. And I'm just going to get you guys to the next level here. I don't want to double my coins. And it's telling me, hey, I got to the connection. Let's do this last one. I need to, now this is a new mechanic again. Last one, right? So I need to get these mechanics, these keys, right? I can collect 3 keys. And I also can use hearts to get back health. That's what it tells you. So let's do that. And what happened is because one of the keys fell to the bottom level, I was able to acquire a key. I need 2 keys. That means I got to get them to the bottom level, right? That's what I need to do. It says a tip, collect hearts when your health is low. So he's telling us what to do. I want to get these guys down to the bottom level. So let's do that. I want to do an attack and satisfy my key requirement like this. All right. Okay, now one thing to note is that was a very bad attack because that's not his weakness. His weakness would be greens. I don't have any green here. So, and I got 1 attack left before he attacks me back, right? But it looks like there's a nice, beautiful chain of these things if I wanted them, right? I still want to get the key down here, which is my goal. So I want to be able to do something like this, right? Because if I did this, then I attack him, the key goes down, I collected a key, and okay, now I have one attack left. I need to kill him, right, as an example. And if I don't kill him now, because you can see that, again, I need greens. I have no green on the screen. If I don't kill him now, what's going to end up happening is he's going to attack me. So now shields would be great, right, as an example. Or hearts if I fail to do that as well. But he's only got 16 health left, which means chances are I'm going to be okay. But my goal is to get one of these two keys down over here, which means, you know what? Let's overkill. And we're going to move both these two keys down. Let's do that. Oh, yeah. Right? And we also get that awesome, right? Because they also do that. Okay, now this guy, this is where it comes crazy, right? I've got 19 attacks before he attacks me once. All right, thou shall not pass. Again, a reference to Tolkien's stuff, which is kind of neat again from a dialogue perspective. This is really where I think they really did a great job here. But he's got unlimited health, guys, unlimited health, which means no matter what I do with him, I cannot defeat him. The only way I can defeat him is by getting that key back, right? So my goal is to get this key down here, however I do it, right? Or this key down here, right? Now we got to decide from a pattern which one we want to do. It says get the remaining key before the monster makes you toast, all right? So this is what we want to do. I move this thing down here or this one down here. We can clearly see that the hearts would be okay, but I don't have any damage right now. So let's start off with the first attack. So we move that down. We can see that we've got this here, and we still don't have a pattern. This one might be getting us closer, right, as an example. So we're going to use up the hearts anyway, okay? So we get a heart back, but it brings us closer to this, which is what we want. Now we're going to do a massive attack. Look at that one. It doesn't do anything, by the way. Look, we can do a crazy attack as we want. Even though it's our great attack, it does 0 damage to them. We still have 16 attacks left because they want us to win, and here's the win. Right, we got the key, we can get out of here, and that's a different way of winning. They showed us another way of surpassing the character. One way is to kill the enemy, and the other one is to get keys or other items in order for us to get through, which is kind of a neat thing. Again, going back to the narrative, right, of what this thing is about. 502 coins, okay. And I want to go with a defense, right, because I got kind of, my defense is low, yay. And now we're finally at our weapon where I have some money. I have 2,000 coins. I can do a couple things. I can try and buy a mace if I had 7,500 coins. If I actually did that, I'm getting double the coins every single time. I might have the money here to do that, right? Where I want to upgrade. I have an equipped item as an example, and I could try to upgrade if I want to, right? So the only thing I can upgrade is my rusty sword, which costs 2,300 credits or coins. I don't have that, so I'm going to continue on. So it talked about that mechanic with us. Now we're at the end, and finally, this is where I wanted to get to, where we have a non-player character, which is kind of telling us, hey, what's going on? Tell me about your day. How may I help you? Now, there's two things I can do. I need a drink, or I'm having a bad day. I'm going to choose I'm having a bad day. He's going to say, would you like to tell me about it? I'm going to say, I'm seeing leprechauns, right? Sounds like you might have had too much orc juice, which is what the leprechaun told me, which makes the leprechaun more believable. Enough about me and your news. And he's going to talk about this new dragon, right? That's kidnapped the princess. Oh my God, what an archetype. We've seen that before, right? And I'm going to say, I eat dragons for breakfast because that's the kind of player I am. Yes, you can. Aren't dragons normally peaceful creatures? It says, you make me laugh, little knight. Maybe you can slay the dragon with your stand-up routine. So again, it's kind of neat. It's a little bit anachronistic, but so has everything else been so far in the game. The dialogue, you know, with references to Princess Bride and with Lord of the Rings and a bunch of other stuff that we've seen already have come out, and we're seeing yet another anachronism, right? All right, cool. So aren't dragons normally peaceful creatures? Not when some knight steals a gem from its lair. Stealing from a dragon, that's crazy. And then it says, you're a good customer. Thanks for not robbing me at sword point. Tap to continue. Cool, I've got this. I get a gift, right? Wow, thanks. And see you later. Now I can continue down to the next one. Okay, let's do this to battle. Last thing, guys, and then we're gonna stop, and I'm gonna get your impressions of this thing as well. All right, cool. Free from the last dungeon at last, right? And now we see this guy. He has a weakness of he's got this, which means his weakness is fire. I need to use fire against this guy. It says hero candy, shiny wrapper on the outside, gooey on the inside. All right. Okay. So very interesting. So fire is what I need to use against this guy as much as possible. Let's try it. Bam. Even though that's pretty cool, he's got 69 health and I got 16. Oh boy. All right. Let's try it again. So, okay, I'm going to hit him with fire again. Okay, that wasn't that great. And there's probably nothing that I can hit him with again that's going to do it with what I have. Shields. Cool. No damage. That's awesome. All right, I need fire now, right? Or some other kind of attack because I don't have much fire. So let's try this. Attack number 1. Okay, he's got like 15 health left. I can probably nail him with this stuff. Okay, he's gone. Excellent. So now we can see the mechanic. I remember the mechanic and I'm going through. Uh-oh, this is new. There we go, a new mechanic. We're on the different side of the tavern. And now I'm facing 2 creatures at the same time. And you can see that this guy has only 2 attacks left. This guy has got 3 attacks. And I'm going to face off with the guy that's nearest to me. This means that it'd be nice if I can finish this guy off as soon as possible. But guess what? It says, hey, you took my eggs. This looks like an angry bird. This looks like a flying pig. Bacon and eggs, my favorite. Okay, question. Does he have a weakness? Right? The answer is no. He's got 95 health and no weakness. That means I got to find the biggest chain I can to nail this guy. And even with that, I got 1 attack left. Oh God, look at what this looks like back here. You get a very Mario kind of flavor to it, which is interesting. They didn't steal that at all, did they? All right, so cool. I've got 2 attacks. This guy's got 1 attack. He's definitely going to nail me with a hit. And I got no shields that I can possibly get, but I got lots of these hearts, which I'm going to have to use now. All right. All right, let's try another really massive chain. Oh, yeah. Awesome. All right, so I need to either kill this guy now. He's fire, which means he is susceptible to cold. And I'm probably not going to be able to do it with the way this is set out right now. So a couple things. I can try some other attack first. There's 1 shield here at the corner. It's not going to help me. There's a couple shields here. I'm just going to eat it. Cool. That took half his health. Here's his attack. Chomp. That's the first time that actually I've been attacked and that I've taken damage this entire round. But I've got 2 more attacks before he can attack. I need to use something that is, again, cold related because he's fire. So let's see if I can do that. So again, cold related. Chomp. Oh, that's terrible. What a terrible thing. All right, well, we're not going to do a big chain because I don't want to waste it, but I want to try and get some of these down here. Now we got to think about which ones I want to create. Look at that big chain there, if I can do it. Okay, cool. He's dead. Now I'm off to the treasure chest, and this is where I can use a massive chain to see if I can get more points. And I got a shield. Cool. I went through it with that one. I've got a bunch of stars. 1, 2, 3 stars. I got a bunch of coins. I could go double coins if I want. I'm going to press OK. And I can choose another upgrade because I went up a level. I leveled up to level 4. Again, I think that attack is probably just as important. I got 11 hearts. I never put my hearts up. If you're already at stage 12, you can stop. Absolutely. I'm just going really, really slow because I'm explaining what I think, what I'm looking at. And I'm going to hear from you guys after this. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to go with health upgrade. And that's good. And then that's it. We can go on. I'm going to stop here. There's a mystery gift, right? There's my gift, which is some coins. I've received 2,500 coins. And now I can upgrade. Take a look at that, right? I have enough coins to upgrade. This is the upgrade mechanic where I can upgrade my rusty sword by bringing all the stats up, which is pretty cool. The next upgrade is at 4,600 coins. I don't have enough. So I'm pretty good. And this is kind of the mechanic to get me to buy coins, right? Because I can upgrade and I can do more. All right, guys, that's it for Night Story. All right. So Jaden says LD Player didn't work, but I got it on my phone and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I felt it was a lot of fun too. So now let's talk about your impressions. We just played Good Night Story, and thoughts, guys. What are your thoughts? Let's talk about stuff. How did it feel? Was it fun? And how did the guide character help the protagonist in the story? Did it make a difference? Did you care about the guide character? Did they do what they wanted to do with this one? What are your thoughts? And again, I would take some thoughts also from some of the people on YouTube. I think this is also a time for them to come on. So Jonathan said it was entertaining. I didn't really care about the guy, in my opinion. Okay, cool. Jonathan says, I once got a telegraph chain, but it could have been longer and it would have killed the enemy. So that annoyed me. Yeah, I know. Sometimes it can happen. Anyone else have any kind of the tutorial chain? Yeah. And it should have killed the guy, but it didn't. Anyone else have any thoughts around this game? Right? Jaden says I got lucky and hit a massive chain. Cool. Right? So what makes this game addictive is a couple things for me that made it addictive, and I'll talk about my thoughts around this thing while you guys come up with some of your own. And again, I fully encourage you to think about the positive things around this game. Samuel says the gameplay reminds me of Grindstone, which I really like. Cool. Leo says it was fun. I'm not super engaged with the protagonist, more gameplay oriented for myself. Okay, so cool. So you don't care about the actual characters, but you really like the gameplay. All right, good. John says simplicity and quick gameplay made it a little addicting. For me too, right? Again, we talked about hyper casual kind of games. Guys, you could sit there and this is the kind of the perfect kind of game to sit in a place where you're waiting. You play a little stuff. It's interesting. It distracts you. It's got a bit of a story. You can skip the narrative if you want it or read it. I think some of it's really funny, right? Again, for the times that it was written. Again, we're thinking back 2016, right? So it still holds up okay today, right? So that's a really good aspect of the game, right? And there's some bad things about it too, right? Like if you don't like puzzle games like this, and then it might be something that doesn't really bring you back to play more. But it's a kind of game that you could see yourself, in my opinion, playing over and over again, right? Look, I've started this game a bunch of times, right? And just like Jaden said, you can always go back and replay and kind of, get some more, kind of troll or, kind of get more coins by playing the same level over and over again, which is kind of cool. So really great stuff. Simplicity, some good graphics, simple enough for your technical artist to chomp into. Some good recognizable user interface items. Okay, and this is new. This is the one new piece, this thing right here, which is the mechanic that basically says to us, we've never seen this kind of mechanic before, where one kind of power is greater than the other. Not like this. We've seen it in other games, which is different. But this is interesting that some creatures have weaknesses, and we need to be able to attack them. And it tells us right here, it's always a reminder going on what the weakness is going to be. All right? And what the level of the weakness is too. Okay, so there we go. So again, Jonathan says, I've seen this type of game a lot, surprisingly. Keep getting ads for a match with 3 elements. Yeah, for sure. There's tons of them. And again, but this is way back in 2016. There's been a lot of stuff that's been made, back then. And I think they're going to continue to making games like this because of Candy Crush and a bunch of other games that are very similar. Okay. And that was the first part of our kind of our exciting piece, which was like, hey, let's try this out. So let's think about the guide character then. So let's end off the guide character piece a little bit. Again, I'm not going to take a break today, guys. I want to kind of get through so that we don't have a lot left. I want to get through so that we can, kind of end off a little early today if possible. But let's think about this again. So think about onboarding roles for guide characters. Why are they important? They help us. They give context to the game. It's someone telling us what to do. It's not just the game itself telling us what to do, which is kind of like, who's telling us that? How are we knowing what to do in the game? It keeps it more contextual. right? And when writing guide characters, let's think about shaping them into interesting characters. Like, make sure that their tutorial dialogue is clear and succinct. We talked about this, and works in concert with the tutorial's visuals and sound. So again, technical artists, engineers, you need to be engaged in this one. Keep their word choice in line with the game's overall tone. The overall tone for this game is lighthearted humor that ties into some, kind of the collective nerdiness of people who've watched all kinds of movies, right? Things like everything from Lord of the Rings to The Princess Bride and all kinds of other, fantasy type movies that are out there. They're tapping into that same tone. Establish clear motivations for the guide character to help the player. So why is the leprechaun helping the knight? Establish clear motivations and desires for their lives outside of assisting the player, right? How do you uninstall an LD player? The way you do that is just to kind of go back there. If you take an app like Night Story and you drag it to the left, you'll see that there's a little trash symbol that comes on the left, and that'll actually uninstall the app if you want. Okay, just drag it over here. All right, so that is the guide character. Questions, comments about guide characters? Would you use them in your own game? What are your thoughts before we move on? And then I'll talk about the last part, which is characterization in mobile. Jonathan says, I do like them as a concept. Yeah, they're neat. They take a lot of work. There's a lot of work involved in making them believable. I've had some that were well done in my own games. Awesome, right? And again, I think they like mascot characters or something like that. Fardine says, I like them. Feels more immersive. Jonathan says, own games I've played. Yes, awesome. Not the games that you've made. I thought you made some of your own. That was pretty cool. I was like, wow, that's awesome games. If you made games, that's awesome. So that's pretty cool. Let's move on to some of this. Let's talk about characterization and character development finally for mobile. So again, one thing is that characters show their characterization and development through the game story. We talked about that. Character and story are linked together. Story includes quests and events in the story campaign, cinematics, cutscenes, and some mobile games use storytelling techniques. We talked about narrative, right? You may find that there are other narrative tricks may be more appropriate. For example, maybe non-storytelling type games, right? There's still a narrative, but it's not traditional. Okay, and we're going to be talking about those two things. And again, either whether you use conventional or unconventional means, characters still need to be interesting and entertaining. If they're not, players won't care about them and they won't be memorable. All right, you want to make the character memorable. The more memorable the characters you have in your game are, even guide characters, okay, even guide characters who are just tutorialization characters, if you think about it, or NPCs, they can turn into NPCs later on, right? It'll bring the player back. They'll remember those characters, right? Let's get back into this. So NPCs need lives too. Okay, I love this. Doesn't matter if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or whether you're playing a console or PC game, they need to have some kind of relationship to the PC, even if it's to give a lore tidbit to explain something about the world. And this is true for Dungeons and Dragons. If you have an NPC, the NPC is going to be reflective of the game world. Again, if you're playing in Suncrest, as an example, there's got to be something that you're in there. It's more, remember what Daryl was talking about, our second lecture. He came in and talked about how his game is he was watching a lot of Godfather. He was watching a lot of gangster movies, and he wanted to bring that gangster kind of feel to a narrative campaign that was in a fantasy setting. So how do I bring kind of gangsters in a fantasy setting to make it interesting? And it's been, I can tell you from being a player in the game, it's been very interesting so far. Okay. And so each of the non-player characters are reflecting the game world itself. Okay. So again, sometimes an NPC might just be there to tell you how to beat the boss, and that's it. But it also could be that you might see them again somewhere further down the line. So again, one of the things is you want to use really, kind of good NPCs to make the world more believable, and they shouldn't feel out of place in the world that they inhabit. And again, you would use things like your world building to design believable NPCs for the world like I talked about, think about Suncrest or think about your own game campaign. How can you make believable NPCs? What are the best type of NPCs out there? They're very much, they have motivations, they have a character, they have a personality, just like your player character does. Okay. Um, they can be friends, they can be allies, they can be fighting companions, they can provide feedback. That's what NPCs are for. One of the things that I think that I missed a lot when Fallout 76 came out, I remember that they were promising this crazy game, right? Todd Howard came out and he's like, yes, Fallout 76, it's going to be a multiplayer game like you've never seen before. And it's going to be, you know, an amazing Fallout game. And then it was the game that we never saw before because, you know what, it was full of glitches. And one of the major things that was missing in Fallout 76 was there was no non-player characters. They just didn't exist in the world, right? No one's there to help you out. It kind of took away from what we saw in other games in the Fallout series, right? Fallout 4 and Fallout 3. Non-player characters that kind of connected to, you know, kind of side quests or the main quest to kind of give flavor to what the game was about. One of my favorite parts of Fallout 4, and actually Jaden says this too, is non-player characters, right? Non-player characters didn't exist until later. Finally, they've added them back in, and they did that because of an overwhelming demand from players to say, where are my NPCs? The world feels empty. It doesn't make sense. How is every other Fallout game we've played so far got a bunch of NPCs, even from Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, they were there. And now we don't have them in Fallout 76 in our latest incarnation. Why wouldn't we? So they finally add them back in. So again, they provide opportunities for us to explore the world through main quests and side quests. That's what they are. There are a lot of times there are quest hooks or adventure hooks. You know, your NPC, your friend comes to you and says, hey man, you know what? I'm getting called back home. You know, we need to, unfortunately, I have to leave you. You know, there's a couple things you can say. Oh, I'm so sorry that you're doing that. Or, hey, maybe I can come with you. Where is your home? Well, my home is, you know, it's being, you know, we've got an attacker. I've got to get back home because my family's called me back home. So a couple things you can do. You can go with them, right? Go back home with them. You can say, maybe I should come with you. And then they might say something like, well, you know, I would love if you did. Thank you. I need help. I didn't expect you to say yes. I know you're busy with your own stuff, you know, kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing that can lead you from one adventure to the other. And a crafty GM could kind of lead you into that by giving that. If the GM's telling you something, if an NPC's talking to you, there's a reason why they're talking to you. Jane says they were broken at times, NPCs, but they made a post-apocalyptic world feel more alive. Absolutely. All right, so enemies, mini bosses, bosses. I'm thinking about, you know, Borderlands. There's a lot of narrative, a lot of backstory in Borderlands that they added in there. Some really cool, funny bosses and mini bosses that we saw throughout the entire time. And it made it so it's interesting. I always wanted to, you know, kind of go to the next boss with Borderlands so I could see like the next funny thing that they were going to say. So one of the things we also get is something called flavor text. A lot of times, you know, it's another way of fleshing out the world. Again, it might be something like, for example, when we talked about Magic the Gathering. And Magic the Gathering, although it's not a role-playing game, it's another game where we can combat one person or the other. The flavor text of the cards can really give us a sense of the set that you're playing in, right? So flavor text is huge. Flavor text when it comes to role-playing games, core books. You want to cast a spell, there's flavor text a lot of times along with the spell, right? Or along with something that you're doing. And that flavor text is something that I really love, right? That's something that's kind of, you know, it adds kind of more a different dimension to the game because it gives us a little bit of backstory, a little bit of lore every single time we see it. So really, really cool stuff that you can add in and some more lore for your game. Another thing that we have a lot of times, we have regular skills, right? So sometimes what happens is through these kind of games, we kind of upgrade our skills and get another level, but including something like legendary skills to the game where, hey, there's going to be certain skills that you can only get through the quest line. And I'm thinking about Destiny, right? As an example, right? So you get different powers. You can specialize in Destiny, right? And so you get these legendary powers and you can choose your path in the beginning about what you want to do. The whole acquiring that different kind of legendary skill or unique skills that we're talking about here for your particular character, almost like a perk. Sometimes again, I'm thinking about Bethesda's Skyrim, where you can get different kinds of perks or legendary abilities. Those legendary abilities bring us back. We want to continue, it's kind of in us to continue to evolve our character and make them special, make them different than every other incarnation that we're ever going to play. Every time we do a run through of a particular game, we want to have a different opportunity to, to upgrade our character, to try different things, not always the same things. So one of the things we do is we use, we only can acquire usually legendary skills through some kind of quest chain. Okay, a lot of times we might have a quest chain, or it could be part of the main quest. We have to do the main quest in order for you to get the legendary skill. Sometimes crafty designers will include a legendary skill that's part of the main quest line so that they get the players to actually go on the quest line that they've designed. They're like, look, I understand you love the side quests and you never want to do the main quest, but if you do this main quest line, I'll give you this really cool skill, really cool power that you won't be able to get unless you do it, right? Sometimes that can be annoying as well because it's kind of heavy-handedness, right? But the idea with it is that it moves the gameplay along, and legendary skills unlock other game features. This is kind of something that we see a lot of times in games. And last point that we want to talk about tonight, okay, we're going to end up a little bit early, is, if your game has animations, you can communicate things about those characters in the way that they move, right? So characters that we're talking about tonight, right? So again, technical artists, I'm putting up my hand here. There's so much room for you to continue to express, your characters. Think about when you're making your animations, how they would move. Don't worry about just making them walk. If you have a character who's mean, make them walk mean. Put on a mean face when you're actually doing the animation. And I think Gavin talks about that a lot, about emotion when it comes to, putting together your rigging for your character and that kind of stuff. And it's not just about, obviously, motion capture is huge in the industry nowadays, but that's why they have performance capture. It's called performance capture, not motion capture, because they have true actors that go in there and then they use their body language to express the character that they're animating, which is really super important. So it should feel like the character is moving, or instead of just regular locomotion, moving from one place to the other. When they're moving, when they're animating, it should feel like they're expressing themselves. When they're angry, their body language should feel angry. When they're happy, their body language should feel happy. All that stuff is part of the way that the characters can express themselves, and you can do it by adding in those little nuances. And that's why having awesome animators that can tweak performance capture, are super important. And they do that everywhere in AAA studios and Ubisoft and other places. Again, speaking to Rui about it on a regular basis, he's always amazed how they have performance capture, actors come in, and then you have your animators go in and tweak it to make it that much more fantastical, that much more unbelievable, for some of the things that the actors couldn't do. And that's something that we can do with behind the scenes in a studio compared to being behind a camera. All right, so that is my talk about characterization and characters in mobile, but it applies not just to mobile, but to our traditional games as well. Any comments or thoughts about the stuff that we've talked about today? I'm super happy that you guys were able to join in the little gameplay we did. I'd like to keep it interactive like that. And I think looking at mobile games from here on in is something that we want to try and do every single time, right? And the reason for this, someone's burning down the house again. Every single time I'm with you guys, there's people burning down my house. It's crazy, right? But the reason why I want to do this, I want to, talk about mobile games and show you mobile games, is there's something we can learn from every successful mobile game like this together. And again, if you got some interesting mobile games you want to look at, there's going to be opportunities for us to do that as well. So very, very cool stuff. And really super excited to do that. All right, so again, sitting at week 7 next week, what are we doing? We're talking about dialogue challenges in mobile games, right? And we're going to be talking about the narrative RPG as well. We have a case study, a new type of game called Fiasco. It's a tabletop gaming experience, right, which uses narrative as opposed to rolling dice. So we'll talk about how that works and how that can be brought into a video game. How do you bring something that's pure, I know, Jaden, how can you bring in something that's pure narrative, no rolling, and yet get someone through the game? And I'm thinking about games like Minecraft Story Mode. When I first played that, I was like, wait, but you can just click, and it doesn't matter what you click, you're still going to get through the story. My son loved that. You know, he was really young, and at the time, and he was like into it. You know, just go, and it was just into that, right? You can just play Minecraft Story Mode and you're good to go. There's nothing to do, and there's like literally just narrative, right? So we'll talk about that next week, and how Fiasco, which is a very interesting way of doing it is on Netflix. Wow. How Fiasco is a game that is being played with no dice. There's 0 dice. You don't have to roll at all, and with the imagination, it's pure storytelling. And I think it's really cool. If you ever have a chance to play Fiasco, I'll see if I can get the basic rules for you out there. But there's some really great stuff here for this experience. We're going to be talking about that next week. All right, on the docket, things to remember that are due. Again, assignment 3 is due. Assignment 3, I'm working with the concepts of what I want you guys to do. This is, again, a group thing. For assignment 3, and I've been playing with the details. I want to hone it down. It should be something that's small. It should be a group activity that you guys do. I don't want to load you too much with it this week because you have your first playable or second playable release, but it should be something you can do in week. And what I'm looking for is make a simple combat system. I'm going to go through it again with you guys, as well as some simple abilities for your own game system, and then play it out. We're going to talk about that in assignment 4. All right, that's it for today. Any questions before we go, guys? All right, thank you so much then. See you next week. Good luck on your project part 2, the second playable. Please connect with me if you want feedback or if you need anything to help you with building that project. All right, thanks so much, guys. Take care. Enjoy.